You're listening to The Unsafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
Life's good. Israel's rich. Judah's rich. And nobody's bothering them. Isaiah takes and begins ministering when everything's good. There's plenty of food. There's peace. There's a strong military. Yeah, there's an idol worship problem in the north. Yeah, that's going on. In the south, they were worshiping the Lord, but we'll see as we start going through the book of Isaiah that God actually says, why are you doing this? Because you don't mean it.
Sometimes when we Christians start in church ministry or start serving in areas of the church, and we often do so at a time when our life is good, we think maybe we can keep up this good streak of nothing crazy happening. But the truth is, life has its ups and downs. In today's message, Pastor Ken will encourage you to look at the life of Isaiah. He had plenty of struggles in life, and yet he continued to faithfully obey God's calling on his life to be a prophet, to influence people back then, and even influence us today. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Isaiah, chapter 1, as he continues his message, The Prophet and the Prophecy.
The Babylonian Talmud tells us, and it was written Manasseh killed Isaiah, so it's Jewish tradition. It shows up twice in the Babylonian Talmud. In fact, it also says, here in Babylonia, it's explained that he killed Isaiah, and that's the sin at hand. So, I mean, that's kind of the Jewish tradition behind it. There's a reference in Hebrews 11, 37 and 38 that some believe this is a reference to Isaiah. They were stoned, they were sawn in two. There are some who think that's a reference to Isaiah, but it doesn't say so. They were tempted, they were put to death with the sword, they went about in sheepskins, goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, ill-treated men of whom the world was not worthy. This is the hall of fame of all those who had faith. So at this point in the history of God's people, where we are when Isaiah begins his ministry, the Jews are in two separate kingdoms. You have a northern kingdom and you have a southern kingdom. In terms of physical size, the northern kingdom is much larger than the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom includes mountains and most of the agricultural production area, sheep herding and goat area of the country, and the southern area is predominantly desert. So there's this dichotomy that exists between these two countries. Now, they are in two kingdoms for a simple reason. Solomon had a problem with women. The Torah explicitly said, here's how the king should operate. And it says it in Deuteronomy 17, verses 14 to 20. So it says, when you enter the land which the Lord your God gives you, and you possess it and live in it, and you say, I'll set a king over me like all the nations who are around me. Now, when Moses is writing this, there's no king. You shall surely set a king over you, whom the Lord your God chooses. One from among your countrymen you shall set as king over yourselves. You may not put a foreigner over yourselves who is not your countryman. Moreover, he shall not multiply horses for himself. Yeah, Solomon did that. Since the Lord has said, you shall never return again that way, nor shall he cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. Okay, so because the Lord said, you will not turn that way again. Here's where Solomon blew it. He shall not multiply wives for himself, or else his heart will turn away, nor shall he greatly increase silver and gold for himself. Solomon was paid his body weight in gold every year he was king. By the way, that's 666 talents, which is an interesting number. It shall come about that when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself a copy of this law on a scroll in the presence of the Levitical priests. And we don't know if any of them ever did that. It shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God by carefully observing all the words of this law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted up above his countrymen, that may not be turned aside from the commandment to the right or the left, and that he and his sons may continue a long time in the kingdom. Now, here's what 1 Kings has to say about Solomon. And Solomon had a problem. Chapter 11, verses 1 to 13. Now, King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh. Remember, he's not supposed to have all these women. He's not supposed to have all these foreigners. But here it says Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, you shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. We saw that in Deuteronomy. Solomon held fast to these in love. And here's the real problem. He had 700 wives. I remember talking to my Kuwaiti Air Force counterpart who was marrying wife number 3. He would complain to me all the time about his 2 wives. And then when he said, I'm getting married with wife number 3 and I want you to come to the wedding, Ken, I'm going like, Khalif, really? You complain about the 2 you have. Solomon outdid that. He had 700. His heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, and as the heart of David his father had been. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, who is also known as Molech, the detestable idol of the Ammonites, and that'll show up later under Ahaz, who is going to be king during one of the time periods of Isaiah. Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not follow the Lord fully as David his father had done. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable idol of Moab, on the mountain which is east of Jerusalem, and for Molech, again, or Milcom, on the mountain which is east of Jerusalem, and for the sons of Ammon. He did all for his foreign wives, which burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. And the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice and had commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after other gods, but he did not observe what the Lord God had commanded him. So the Lord said to Solomon, because you have done this and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I've commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and will give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days for the sake of your father David, but I'll tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I'll not tear away all the kingdom, but I'll give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I've chosen. These gods that he starts talking about in 1 Kings become a serious problem for Israel and for Judah. There's one location, the one dealing with Molech, which becomes a big problem. So, I mean, he's got wives coming in from everywhere, as you can tell. But even today, you can see the impact of his worship of Molech. So we have Israel that's divided. You have a north kingdom, Israel, a south kingdom, Judah. And you have to remember that because you'll see their names separate in the book of Isaiah. He'll talk about Israel, and you're going to be thinking it's the whole country, and he's talking about the north. And then occasionally he'll say Judah, or he'll say Jerusalem. He also compares Jerusalem to Sodom and Gomorrah, too, which is not a good thing. But you'll also see there's other kingdoms. These other kingdoms at one time were all paying tribute to David and to Solomon. And some of them will pay tribute to Hezekiah, Philistia, Edom, Moab, Ammon. They'll pay him tribute. But the country's been divided. It's been divided for some time. And the reality after Solomon is simple. They have a cold war that's been going on. It's a cold civil war. Ever since Solomon's death, every so often it gets hot, and they attack each other and kill each other. But for much of their history, there's this cold war that's underneath the relationship. The northern kingdom under their first king, his name was Jeroboam. Now there's a Jeroboam and a Jeroboam the second. Jeroboam the second we'll have to talk about because he overlaps Isaiah. But the first king, his name was Jeroboam. And he had to confront several political realities. The first was, how do you keep a bunch of people together when they have to go worship in the other kingdom? They go to Jerusalem to worship. So he became the first politically correct false worshiper, if you want to call it that. He came up with a politically expedient solution that began the march all the way to the exile to Assyria, which takes place several hundred years later. And you see this phrase continually in 2 Kings when it talks about each king of Israel, the northern kingdom. He did evil in the sight of the Lord as his fathers had done. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which made Israel sin. They just wouldn't depart. So what is this? Well, in 1 Kings 12, verses 26 to 31, Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will return to the house of David if the people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord of Jerusalem. Then the heart of this people will return to their Lord, even to Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they'll kill me and return to Rehoboam. So the king consulted and made 2 golden calves. One wasn't enough, he made 2. And he said to the people of the north, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, that brought you up from the land of Egypt. He set one in Bethel, which is amazing, and the other one he put in Dan. Now this thing became a sin for the people, went to worship before the one as far as Dan. And he made houses on high places and made priests from among all the people who were not of the sons of Levi. He was even putting the wrong priests into positions of power. So what happened is Jeroboam made idol worship politically correct in Israel, not Judah, Israel, the northern kingdom. He expanded the priesthood beyond the tribe of Levi and made priests of those who were not supposed to be priests. So what happened is those who worshiped Yahweh moved to Judah. Those who liked idol worship moved to Israel. So, you've got this migration that takes place between the two countries at this point in time. But what they did, what Jeroboam did, is still in existence today. You can see it at Tel Dan. And you wonder why, from the book of Revelation, there's 12 tribes listed that become part of the 144,000, but there's one tribe that's not there. It's the tribe of Dan. And you'll wonder why. Okay. So as it went for Yahweh worship among his people, there's full-blown idolatry in the north, and they play around with idolatry in the south. And it looks like everything's okay, but it's not okay. Geopolitically, there is Cold War, which, of course, explodes every now and then, and it will during the reign of Ahaz. There will be Cold War, and Ahaz will actually entice the Assyrians to come and take the north into captivity. Nice guy. Meanwhile, the surrounding Gentile powers, which have not been an issue up to this point, are becoming an issue because God is judging what's going on in these two nations as a result of their sin. At some point, both nations will no longer be able to maintain military might and political power. It's referenced in the Torah, the power is, but it's contingent upon obedience and loyalty to Yahweh, and they won't be either one. From an economic and political position, at this point in time, when Isaiah begins his ministry, everything is good. Everybody has 2 chariots in the garage. Okay? There's actually a reference in Isaiah chapter 3 to the women of Jerusalem who have got all kinds of jewelry. And, of course, Isaiah talks about it as taking away of things. But he says in chapter 3, verse 18, in that day the Lord will take away the beauty of their anklets, headbands, crescent ornaments, dangling earrings, bracelets, veils, headdresses, ankle chains, sashes, perfume. He just goes on and on and on. So you can see that they were not poor. They're doing quite well economically at this point. Jeroboam the second, we talked about that, it was the first one. This is the second one. He had put down the Syrian problem. There was not a problem with Syria at this point. They were actually paying him money to have him not go and attack them. He was extracting tribute from the Syrian king. Assyria had other problems to deal with. They were busy trying to take care of what was going on in the Assyrian, in the Tigris and Euphrates river basins. The headquarters of Assyria, Nineveh, is in the place in Iraq that we today call Mosul. And it's still there. You can still see it. The north was doing very well. Jeroboam II, he had military success like crazy, but he was not following the Lord. He restored the borders of Israel as they had been earlier, and his kingdom stretched from the entrance of Hamath, the high slopes in the valley between the 2 ranges of the Lebanon Mountains, that's way north, to the Sea of the Plain. His borders went all the way to the Dead Sea. So, his borders go way north of where Haifa is today to what's part of Jordan today, which is the Dead Sea. In Judah, you also have economic and political things going on that are good. Under King Uzziah, who's also called Azariah. So if you're looking in Kings, it's Azariah. If you're looking in Chronicles, he's Uzziah. Things in the south were also good. He became king at the age of 16 and reigned 52 years. And he was a godly king for the most part. I have to say that because he wound up with having a little pride problem. He successfully dealt with the Philistines, the Arabs, and a tribal group called the Meunites, which is Arabs. He beat them and subjugated them. He was extracting money from them. His military power was recognized by all the surrounding powers, and unlike them, he had a standing professional army of several thousand troops. I mean, his officers were over 1,200 people. He's not a wimp in terms of military power. He knew what he was doing. In 2 Chronicles 26, verses 8 to 11, the Ammonites gave tribute to Uzziah, and his fame extended to the border of Egypt, for he became very strong. Moreover, Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate and the valley gate and at the corner buttress and fortified them. He built towers in the wilderness and hewed many cisterns, for he had much livestock, both in the lowland and in the plain. That's an agrarian way of saying the dude's rich. Moreover, Uzziah had an army ready for battle. This is the professional army that he had. He entered combat by divisions according to the number of their muster, prepared by Jael, the scribe, and Messiah, the official, under the direction of Hananiah, who's one of the king's officers. Life's good. Israel's rich. Judah's rich. Nobody's bothering them. Isaiah takes and begins ministering when everything's good. There's plenty of food, there's peace, there's a strong military. Yeah, there's an idol worship problem in the north. Yeah, that's going on. In the south, they were worshiping the Lord, but we'll see as we start going through the book of Isaiah that God actually says, why are you doing this? Because you don't mean it. He goes into great detail when he talks about it. We see a problem in 2 Kings where it talks a little bit about Uzziah and how he's doing all these good things, but it says this in verse 3 of chapter 15. He did right in the sight of the Lord according to all that his father Amaziah had done. Only the high places were not taken away, and the people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. So he didn't deal with those who played with idolatry. He allowed them to continue to play with it. So things are good in the north and the south, and that's the problem. Things are good. What happens to godly people when there's no issues, no problems, they tend to stray, don't they? Well, that's what's happening at this time. And what happened to Uzziah? Well, he read his own press clippings. Never read your own press clippings. I learned that when I was in track and field. Never read that you won the track meet last week because you will lose this week. Because there's always someone who can throw that metal ball further than you can. Well, Uzziah was a great leader, and he was reading all the press clippings about that. So here's the first where we can kind of see who's who at what times. So here we see in the northern kingdom, they had Jehoash, and then Jeroboam II becomes king, and you also have Zechariah and Shallum, but they, like one's for 6 months and one's for a year, so they're just referenced. In Judah, you have Amaziah, and at a point in time, Amaziah dies. This author calls it a co-regency, and then Uzziah becomes king. But at this point in time in the history of both nations, everything is good. But that's the problem. Everything's good. From 2 Chronicles chapter 26, again, this is God's view of history, verse 16, but when he became strong, Uzziah, his heart was so proud that he acted corruptly, and he was unfaithful to the Lord his God, for he entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. That's a no-no. The king is not supposed to do that. There have been kings who have tried doing that and did it in the past. One name was Saul. Didn't end well for him. Azariah the priest entered after him, and with him 80 priests of the Lord to oppose the king, and said to him, it's not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priests, the sons of Aaron, who are consecrated to burn incense. So he's entered the holy place. Here's the curtain going into the Holy of Holies. There's the Ark of the Covenant, and that's where the altar of incense is, and that's where he's at. Get out of the sanctuary, for you've been unfaithful and will have no honor from the Lord God. But Uzziah, with a censer in his hand for burning incense, was enraged. And while he was enraged with the priests, the leprosy broke out on his forehead before the priests in the house of the Lord. So he's talking to them, and all of a sudden, he gets this skin lesion on his forehead. And it starts growing, and they can all see it. Azariah, the chief priest, and all the priests looked at him, and behold, he was leprous on his forehead, and they hurried him out of there. And he himself also hastened to get out, because the Lord had smitten him. King Uzziah was a leper to the day of his death, and he lived in a separate house, being a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Lord. A leper can't go into the temple anymore. It's not possible. Can't be with people, can't do anything. And Jotham, his son, was over the king's house, judging the people of the land. So it says, we'll see that Jotham was actually king for only 16 years, but there's a long period of time that Jotham's really running the show. Uzziah was not a priest. He's a king. There's only one person who is priest and king. His name's Jesus Christ. He can't do priestly functions. And the last time somebody tried to do priestly functions, doing it the wrong way, they paid for it with their lives. Leviticus chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. But we've actually found Uzziah's burial plaque, and it even tells the story. If you look at his burial plaque, it says this: "Here the bones of Uzziah, king of Judah, were brought. Do not open." They're infected with leprosy. But that's what it says in the Hebrew on that plaque. Do not open. I mean, what a legacy, okay? Great king, lots of things happening, and he just got a little too proud. So after he dies, and we see Uzziah's last days, and Jotham starts ruling, basically ruling, but at a point in time Uzziah dies. Jotham becomes king, but Jotham has a child whose name is Ahaz, and there's a period of time where Ahaz is co-regent, and then he becomes king. In the north, you have Menahem, Pekah, and Hoshea. And after Pekah, there's no more kingdom in the north. For all practical intents and purposes, it's pretty much gone. That's not a long period of time. Riches to captivity in the lifespan of one person, Isaiah. There's more to the story that we'll get to as we go through the book. But one of the reasons why I think the study of Isaiah is so timely for us today is because of the time Isaiah ministered. There's economic prosperity. There's military success. Here it's on the part of two kingdoms, but they had military success. Everything was going quite well. One kingdom was whole hog into a sinful lifestyle. They happened to be west of the Mississippi. No, I mean, kidding. Sometimes I wish I was. With some significant holdouts to it. So there were some godly people who were still there. I mean, Elijah, Elisha, the 700 who had not bowed their knee. I mean, there were a lot who were still serving the Lord. The other kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom, plays a show of being holy. Yeah, we're godly, we're good. But their hearts are moving away from God because of their prosperity. And they don't need God anymore. They've got everything. You know, as Solomon said, in the book, in the Ecclesiastes, he said, money isn't everything. I know I have money, I have everything. That's paraphrase, okay? But if you read it, that's what he actually said. As we can tell, though, from the Uzziah problem, there is also a pride in the nation's military might. And this is beginning to sound like another country that we know about, okay? So, I mean, this is very, very relevant for us today.
The voice you just heard is that of Pastor Ken here on the Unsafe Bible, as he's making his way through an Old Testament book of Isaiah. This is one of many teachings in this book, and we trust that the words of Isaiah will encourage you in your own walk of faith. Are you new to hearing the Word of God? Are you still trying to figure out this whole Jesus thing? You know what? That's okay. We all begin somewhere. Are you listening closely? Begin now. We're here for you and would like nothing better than to connect with you. Pretty pleased with a cherry on top to go to our website? All right, it's theunsafebible.com. And click on the Connect tab. Then click on the Connect card. There you'll find a form to fill out. This allows us to get in touch with you. We honestly look forward to speaking with you. If this feels a little overwhelming, we understand. Why not come see firsthand what we're all about? We'd love to have you at one of our services. All information can be found at theunsafebible.com. While you're there, be sure to look around. You can learn more about us and what we believe. Or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. There's also an archive of messages easily organized so that you can find whatever interests you rather quickly. Don't be shy. Stay a while and soak in God's Word. When you're done listening, would you prayerfully consider donating to this ministry? If so, just locate the Give tab to get started. Thank you so much for your support. Our time is about up for today, but we hope you make plans to join us again here on the Unsafe Bible.